I'm going to call this KPIs Part 2. Had an interesting question after our discussion yesterday about the key metrics to keep an eye on in your business and in this case in your chiropractic practice. So we talked about, just to recap, you should think of your business as if you were not on site. What would the 5 to 7 critical numbers be that if you got it through a text message, you would know if your business was doing well on a weekly basis? What would those numbers be? And someone asked me, they said, would these be the same numbers at the beginning of your business or your practice versus if you've been in business or been in practice for a while? And this is a very good question. It's a very good question. And I have a couple answers to them, a couple thoughts. Number one, if the number is important enough to always keep an eye on it, then it's probably a good number, right? Like if you could live with it or live without it, then you should be asking yourself if it's really that important that you need to be worried about it on a weekly basis. These are called critical numbers because they need to be critical by definition. If they're not critical, stop tracking it on a weekly basis. You can track it on a monthly or a quarterly basis, but sometimes we get overly analytical and we get into the weeds and we major in the minor things. So first of all, just make sure that these numbers are critical. And so the first part of the question is like, if it's something that you do need to track, not just as a new business owner, but as if the business has been in practice or been in business for decades, then it's probably a good number to track. That being said, the numbers can change depending on your quarterly objectives. So one of the things that we do is we review on a quarterly basis, what numbers are we going to track this quarter? And is that going to be any different than what we were tracking last quarter? And it depends. And one of the things it depends on is what your quarterly objectives are, right? Your quarterly objectives may fluctuate and change. Theoretically, you should have in place a strategic plan that covers your annual goals, your 3 to 5 year picture, and your 10-year big, hairy, aggressive plan, right? And on a quarterly basis, what you're doing is you're reviewing that strategic plan. You're reminding yourself what you set out to accomplish in the next 12 months. And you're saying, what do I need to do in the next 90 days to take a big step forward towards my 12-month annual goal? Based on that big next step, what are the critical numbers that I can check on a weekly basis to make sure that I'm actually gaining on that annual goal? So step one is to have a strategic plan. That's the thing that we've been talking about recently that my wife and I host every year in the Smoky Mountains. So if you don't have a strategic plan, or you have one but you haven't looked at it and you don't look at it on a regular basis, then we need to talk. And I'll put a link to that in the comments. So step one is to have that plan. Step two is to review it on a quarterly basis. And when you set your quarterly SMART goals that are specific and measurable and actionable and time-bound and realistic and all those things, then you can reevaluate your scorecards and your KPIs to make sure that they're in line with what you're trying to achieve. So they need to be critical and they need to be relevant for your quarterly projects and what you're trying to achieve for the year. Hope that helps. We'll talk to you guys.